Anyways, so I'm excited to talk about this because I think in the last couple of years, especially, this has become a lot more popular in terms of like conversation around skincare products and what we're using. It comes up a lot in the holistic space, especially sometimes in terms of like scare tactics about what to use and not use. And it's coming up in more, traditional, I guess you could call it aesthetic spaces because products are incorporating aspects into their lines, into their products that relate to the microbiome. Or like it's their entire line identity. So it's kind of important, I think, for us to understand what the microbiome is and what's in it and how it works. But then to be able to like look at all the different things that are out there and make really good decisions for our clients, whatever that means for us and our specific business. So always keep that in mind as we go through this. Like everybody has a different perspective and a different way of approaching things, and none of them are necessarily wrong or right to a certain extent. But what makes you you and what makes people come to you and buy from you is the fact that you know what you're talking about and that you can give them that educated information about what you think is going to serve them best for their specific skin and their specific skin condition, which is way more beneficial than like this blanket recommendation they see on social media for a product, right? So it makes us so much more valuable. And to have that education just really makes it so that you're the expert when you talk to your client. So that's kind of my approach here and how we're going to talk about this is, what is actually in the microbiome and then how do we actually support it and how do we prevent it from being broken down? And why is it so important? Why are we even talking about this? So, just as a little bit of like back information, I have been hearing about this for years. When I used to work for Dermalogica, we were talking about the microbiome. They were talking about it in terms of how they formulate, and they were doing a lot of research on it. And the thing about research is that unless you have a lot of money to invest in doing the right types of research, the results that you're getting are always skewed. So small brands are always testing on like small groups or in very small ways, very isolated ways, and they're not able to get a really big picture. Whereas someone like Dermalogica, who has access to all of Unilever's resources, a huge global company, has the ability to do this like large scale data collection and then use algorithms to figure out what's going on in that data. So, just to give you some perspective, some of the things that they were telling us at the time were that different skin types had different types of bacteria that live on the skin. So, you could customize your products to skin type by supporting those specific types of bacteria. They were doing research on targeting acne bacteria specifically with ingredients without harming the microbiome. And so they were able to isolate which or find in the research which acne bacterias were more prevalent in different skin types and how to effectively target those specific bacterias. And they were even doing like global research about like different areas of the world and do these different areas of the world have different microbiomes. So I thought it was super interesting. That was before COVID. So that was like 2019, 2018 maybe that they were talking about this. And at that time, it was really big for brands to talk about like probiotic skincare, or at least it was becoming big. That's like back when Tula first came around. And I think even like oh my gosh, now I can't remember their name. It's like a big Sephora brand. Anyways, they were focusing on probiotics. And the conversation that we were having in the skincare realm was that probiotics can't really be effective because you have to protect them. You have to preserve them in a product. You can't just like throw a probiotic in a product. If you guys take probiotics for your gut, you know this. Like if you want the good ones, you're going to like Whole Foods or something like that, and you're buying them refrigerated because they need to be in this controlled environment to stay alive, for the strains to stay alive. So, a lot of the conversation at the time was like probiotic skincare doesn't really have a lot of research and can't be really effective, but prebiotic skincare is where the research is going to show that things can be really effective. And when we talk about these two things, probiotics and prebiotics, the big difference is that probiotics are actually live bacteria that you're putting on the skin to replicate or um, take the place of the bacteria that's there. So you're trying to put live bacteria in place. And in prebiotics, you're trying to feed the bacterial colonies. So you're giving it the food that it needs in order for it to be the most healthy. So anyways, prebiotic ingredients can come from many different sources. So the conversation was always that probiotics can't really be effective in a product because of the packaging concerns and the processing concerns, and the fact that like you don't even know what bacteria the person needs, and it's not just like a blanket thing you can throw at the skin. But prebiotics was where things were going to go. And I think that what we're showing now, 6, 7 years later, I had to do the math, is that is where skincare has gone, right? Our focus is more on the prebiotic, although there's plenty of probiotics still out there. So if you have been around in the skincare space for a long time, you may have seen like the progression of this. And if you're new to skincare, you're just seeing what's around right now. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of perspective. In that amount of time, though, so much has changed because bacterial research is like an emerging field, with the increase in like funding for this, most likely because of people just being interested, the increase of brand awareness and interest in it, but also because the technology is advanced. So way back when they were first starting the research, it was really hard to isolate different skin types and different ways of pulling the bacteria and then the different bacterial colonies. In this span of time, they've even changed what they call acne bacteria because they've identified that it's actually a different strain of bacteria than they originally thought because of the new types of like DNA and RNA analysis that they can do on bacteria. So there's a lot of growth here that's happening, and it's still emerging research, which means that everything that we talk about could change in like a month or 2 months or next year, um, because it's evolving. So this is just another thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about these things and talking to clients about this is like, not all of it is very well researched. So we're kind of just making guesses about a lot of things based on the information that we have. And some of it is really good information to make really good decisions and choices. And some of it is very new and like experimental, and we're just not there yet. And that's okay. It's like okay to experiment with things. I don't want to make it seem like it's bad, but just know that in your mind. Okay. So what are they finding in research? They're finding that imbalances in the skin microbiome are a primary contributor to conditions like acne, rosacea, eczema, basically everything that's inflammatory can can be related back in some way to the microbiome as a potential um, contributing factor. I'm not going to say it's the only factor, right? All of these have very complex things going on, but the microbiome is a piece of that puzzle. And that's because the microbiome is an essential part of our skin barrier. So if we want healthy skin, we have to look at the microbiome and make sure that it's functioning properly. It's also extremely important for immune regulation. So having responses in the skin to things like uh, the sun, which the immune response of the skin to the sun is what creates inflammation that creates pigmentation. Um, our responses to anything that could be on the skin as some sort of disease, potentially, like our exposure to things in the environment. And it's extremely important for controlling inflammation. And then when, of course, it's out of balance because it has a role in controlling all of these factors and controlling the skin barrier health and controlling the immune function and controlling inflammation, those things kind of spiral out of control to where the barrier breaks down, the immune system isn't functioning properly, the inflammation becomes out of control. There's even more detail to this where some acne colonies actually help with regulating cell turnover. So it is truly a big part of keeping the skin healthy and functioning properly to pay attention to the microbiome. So as of right now, they've identified 4 main categories of bacteria that live on the skin. And within those categories, there are different families that branch out into like these insane numbers of bacteria. And of course, when you think about like, what does that look like on the skin? It's like billions and billions of little tiny things just like creating their own little universe on our skin. So but they can be categorized into these four primary categories. The first is the C. acne bacteria, Cutibacterium. That is the main one that causes acne. So it used to be Probiotic bacterium or something P. acne is what it was. And that's something that I mentioned had changed in the last couple of years, where the research is showing it was actually a different family of bacteria. And they were able to identify that by looking at the bacterial DNA. So this bacteria specifically loves oil-rich areas. So it may not be found all over the body, but it is found in places where we produce a lot of oil. So the face, which has a high concentration of sebaceous glands, the chest, and the back. And these are the only places that people get acne. So if something shows up on another area of the body, it's likely not acne. This is where we get true acne, in these three places. So within that family, though, of the C. acne bacteria, they've identified at least 6 strains. And within these 6 strains, they have different purposes. So some of them can be protective, where they're actually controlling the amount of other acne bacteria that live on the skin. Some of them are highly inflammatory. Some of them can create biofilms, and biofilms are a major concern with like persistent resistant acne, because what's happening is the bacteria basically creates this like antibiotic resistant well, it's a film, but I would think of it like a sack kind of around itself, like it builds itself a cute little house that nobody can get in, including like your topical antibiotics. So it can make acne very resistant. That would be one that creates a biofilm. So it's not like necessarily important to know exactly what strains do what, but it's important to know that there are multiple different types. So what ends up happening is if you throw a blanket antibiotic at somebody who has acne or any of these other skin conditions we're going to talk about, it kills all the bacteria. It doesn't choose the bad strain or the good strain, right? It's not targeted. It's just killing everything. And so then you have this imbalance where all of these strains of protective C. acne bacteria can't do their job anymore because they don't even exist. They're not there. And part of the C. acne bacteria job, when it's not inflammatory, when it's being protective and helpful, is cell turnover. So part of this is the acne bacteria or other bacteria on the skin as well secrete enzymes as they're going through their metabolic processes. So you could think of this like acne poop, acne bacteria poop. They're pooping out all this good stuff that actually breaks down your skin cells, which is helpful for acne because we have hyperkeratinization to think about and build up inside the pores. So you really need those good bacteria to be functioning, to be eating, digesting, and pooping out all those enzymes, because that's what actually helps your skin cells turn over and your skin stay clear of comedones. So that's the first category. The next category is Staphylococcus. So there's 2 main staph species that live on the skin, and these are more prevalent in like either moist areas of the body, so like your underarms, the groin area, or in dry skin. So these 2 types of staph are not inherently bad, okay? I feel like this comes up a lot in acne conversations when people are really super into that medical medium guy. I don't remember what his name is, but I have some of his books. So the medical medium obsessed estheticians are always talking about staph as like a contributor to acne and it being carried through the lymphatic system and blah, blah, blah. It could, some types of staph do cause infections and inflammation, but not all staph does that. S. epidermis, for example, protects the skin. So we don't want to blanket kill all of that either. We want it to be controlled, where the staph that causes infections and inflammation is not overly proliferating. This type of staph that can cause infections is highly found in eczema patients. So this is something that's come up over the years. And when I send you guys the workbook for this, I have links to all the research that I pulled from. But Um, Over the years, the research has shown that people with eczema have a high correlation with staph infections with this specific type of staph. So it's more prevalent, honestly, in dry skin. That's where staph really thrives, this like more negative type of staph in dry skin, even though like the natural colony on the body is those moist environments. When it becomes a negative, I should say it's when it's more prevalent on dry skin. So that's going to be more related to your eczema situations. Um, but it's aureus. Let me put it in the chat so that you can see it because they're always spelled crazy, Latin words. Yeah. So when I have like persistent eczema clients, and I personally deal with eczema, but it's not like it's patchy, right? It's not like all over my hands or anything like that. This is something that I would maybe recommend they look into getting tested for if they can't find a solution for their eczema, or like if other skincare solutions are not working for them. Because for a lot of us, it's really just like we need to keep our microbiome balanced at all times, and we need to keep our barrier balanced at all times. And it really limits the amount of eczema that we deal with. But when it's persistent, that's something to look at. Okay, so the next one is Corynebacterium. This is, in our more humid areas, so in our underarms, and more related to body odor, so not something we really deal with on the face. And then yeast. This comes up in fungal acne, malassezia. So it's more common in oily areas. It really, really, really likes oil. It likes our sebaceous glands, so it kind of hangs out around that area. And it would be the cause of fungal acne most of the time, or seborrheic dermatitis, which you would see on the scalp. So, these things, acne bacteria, the staph that causes eczema, or related to eczema, I should say. It's not necessarily correlation. That's correlated with eczema, and the yeast, they live on the skin all the time. So the problem is not that they exist. The problem is that they have overgrown. And it's because of an imbalance, because of dysbiosis, where the bacterial colonies are not producing beneficial bacteria, or the beneficial bacteria is being stripped. And so these ones get to take over. Also, I didn't put this on this list, but the other thing would be Demodex mites. Demodex mites are implicated in rosacea, and it's the same thing. We all have Demodex mites, but in rosacea skins, they tend to have either an increase of Demodex mites, or they're just highly sensitive to the Demodex mites. I don't think it's been exactly decided which is more likely. So either or can be treated by making sure that you're keeping the microbiome healthy, because that's part of controlling the Demodex mite colonies. So, going through each of these skin conditions that we would want to, um, really make sure that we're focusing on the microbiome with these people. It's going to be acne. So making sure that they have a healthy, amount of bacterial proliferation on the skin to help to control the C. acne bacteria, which is going to help to reduce the inflammation in the oil production. Atopic dermatitis, also eczema, lives in that same category. This is going to be, overgrowth of that staph. Not enough beneficial bacteria, and not enough different types of beneficial bacteria, which reduces the skin barrier down to a point where it can't protect itself anymore. Next is going to be psoriasis. Psoriasis does have a specific bacteria that they have found a higher presence of. I'll put that in the chat for my cuties. Cuties. And this higher presence is more likely to be found in the affected areas. But part of this higher prevalence is an imbalance. Like, these should be on the skin anyways, and so it's just not taking care of itself in the way that it should be. In rosacea, I already mentioned the Demodex mites are the primary concern. And once again, dysbiosis in all these categories, dysbiosis, meaning that the bacterial colonies are not functioning properly. And then, uh, any inflammatory skin condition that relates to an overgrowth of bacteria in some place or like um, smell or inflammation or anything like that, you can make a pretty good assumption that there's some bacterial imbalances there because that's almost always prevalent in inflammation. So inflammation is a sign that something is not functioning properly, and we can look at the internal factors and the external factors and all of that. But the safest solution is to always look at all of them and treat them all. And for the microbiome, the best way to do that is to either increase the diversity or reduce the harmful strains. So we have to be a little bit more strategic about how we do that, I think, in order to protect the skin. Okay, so we talked about acne a little bit. Acneic skin really suffers from this like loss of diversity where it's got an excess amount of the bad. I'm gonna say bad, but I hate to say like bad and good because it's not so black and white, right? The more inflammatory C. acne bacterias, but not enough of the good C. acne bacterias, and not a good amount of the Staphylococcus epidermis, which is more prevalent in dry skin. So that S. epidermis isn't going to be present as much in an oily skin because the C. acne bacteria are kind of taking over. Um, and then, of course, if we have like an overgrowth of that other Staphylococcus, we can be getting infections that are not necessarily related to acne. And that can appear to be acne to an untrained eye. And then, of course, we have fungal acne as a concern. And what we can do for that would be either applying topical probiotics. So, like I said earlier, this is more controversial. I think it's becoming less controversial because it's becoming more normalized. So now we're seeing the information and we're just like taking it as a fact because we've seen it so much. But I think it's still worth asking how these bacteria stay live inside the product for them to benefit our skin. So asking that question of the brand, of the formulators, I think is worthwhile to see how does this actually work? Can they tell us how it works? Do they even know how it works? Or are they just saying like all probiotics help the skin? Because that's not necessarily true. It has to actually get to the skin, do something. So these topical probiotics ideally are going to help to restore the balance. In addition to that, because these beneficial bacteria help with reducing inflammation, it can bring the inflammation down. It can help with regulating that cell turnover. So it's just a matter of like, yes, these things can be really good, but are they actually working the way that the company says that they're working? That's the question I would ask. That's where my skepticism would come in and say, I need more information about how this is working. The next thing that could help would be oral probiotics. So my perspective on this is that none of us should be recommending oral probiotics and none of us should be giving them the ones from skincare brands. So I'm sorry if that offends some people. I know that there are some brands that like really push selling probiotics or like skin supplements. And, if that's what you want to do, then go ahead and do it. My perspective on this is they need their gut tested. So they need to go see a functional medicine doctor, a functional nutritionist, someone who really focuses on what the different bacterial colonies are in the gut, what they're supposed to be, and what the potential problems are in acneic skin. Like, there's some very specific things that come up with acne, like SIBO, or the other one would be, oh my gosh, now I can't remember. H. pylori. So those come up a lot in gut testing acne clients per acne specialist who work on the skin using nutrition, digestion, uh, acupuncture, things like that, herbs. herbal supplements. So per the research that these people have done, you can't just throw an oral probiotic at someone and hope that it makes a difference. Sometimes it can make things worse. It can make the dysbiosis in the gut worse. So my recommendation for acne clients is absolutely a probiotic can be helpful, but which one is it? I don't have access to that information. So please go see them. Ellie, I do. I will send you their information. Uh, yeah, for sure. I know a couple people that do like kind of similar things and maybe taking different approaches, so I'll give you their information. So that would be a really great choice. You know, there are people that do this virtually as well. And so you could basically they have you send in your test and then they consult you virtually. So there's other options. Um, the next thing that we would help with then is prebiotics. And so prebiotics nourish those beneficial bacteria. They're helping to maintain a healthy skin microbiome. And that's something that we can find in abundance in skincare. So super easy for us to be able to help people with. Um, now, the other way that people can go about this is by, you know, going to a doctor who specializes in treating acne with different types of therapies. So there are some experimental therapies where they are like specifically putting good bacteria on the skin, where they're specifically fighting like harmful bacteria using medications. And so they would have to see someone for that. I don't know any information about that. I just know that it's a thing, an emerging research area. Um, and some of the things that may also show up in skincare that's kind of an emerging research area is postbiotics. And postbiotics are basically byproducts of bacteria. So they take bacteria. This is how they make a lot of stem cell and like growth factor type products, but they can do the same thing with bacteria. So they take the bacteria, put it in an environment where it stresses the bacteria or where it feeds the bacteria, and causes it to release some of its enzymes, and then they extract the enzymes and put that in the skincare. So once again, this is a thing of like, how is it done? How does it work? How is it kept good in a product for it to actually work? And most likely you're going to find these in medications at this point because it's not really like widespread in the bacterial realm. Once again, in skincare, this is a widespread practice for growth factors and stem cell type products. So it's not new technology. It just may be new to like targeting acne specifically. Um, and then there's other microbiome friendly types of skincare. So we will talk more in depth about prebiotics, but there are other things like, you know, using fermented ingredients, which can help with, it's like the idea of like drinking kombucha, right? It's like kombucha for your skin, where you can increase the bacterial growth potentially that way. And then there are things that we want to make sure not to do. And so those like stay away from these things are actually going to help to increase bacterial diversity because we're not stripping the good bacteria anymore. And we'll talk about what those are. So our number one challenges, I think, with acne products and acne treatments is that most of our clients who have suffered with acne for a long time have overused antibiotics, whether it's topical or internal antibiotics. And in general, using antibiotics can mess with your biome. So if you, acne aside, if you take antibiotics for anything, you're more likely to have some weird skin stuff show up afterwards because you've thrown off the biome of your body. So in any way, overusing antibiotics can harm microbiome diversity, but in acne clients, it's more prevalent because they're more likely to use topical antibiotics and internal antibiotics on a regular basis to help to treat their acne. Like I know that sometimes they put people on antibiotics like permanently, like you're on a low dose permanently, and that just wreaks havoc on your gut and your microbiome. So it's really not helping the situation in terms of that diversity aspect. Most of our commercial acne treatments, benzoyl peroxide, acids, salicylic acid, are not they're not picky about what bacteria they kill. So if you're overusing commercial acne treatments, then your microbiome's probably destroyed. That's just how it is. Um, and then, the solutions to these things are going to be using topical treatments that are not as aggressive, using things that balance the microbiome, getting off of antibiotics, making sure to take probiotics when you're on your antibiotics so that you're like healing your gut at the same time and not throwing off that diversity. So those are like overall things that we can educate people about, like, hey, you've had acne for a long time. Let's see what antibiotics have you taken? Have you tried taking probiotics? Have you tried speaking to a functional medicine doctor? Can we get you on some microbiome friendly skincare? Because I think that this may be a challenge for your skin, having gone through multiple rounds of topical antibiotics. Uh, those are things that I would be trying to have conversations with people about. Now, with other inflammatory skin conditions, eczema, we really want to make sure that their microbiome is also balanced. A lot of times there's a major link with the gut dysbiosis aspect, so their gut is off as well. And so once again, I would recommend that functional practitioner aspect to test their gut and see what's going on. And then just like letting them know that the bacteria that live on the skin, when they become imbalanced, they contribute to your inflammation. So we can get the inflammation down if we can influence your microbiome to be healthier. And in eczema treatments, I will also say that like bacterial therapy where they're introducing specific types of bacteria or bacterial enzymes to like target specific bacterias is becoming more popular. And you know that like some of the reason why this is being researched, just to add in another layer to this, part of the reason that they're researching like targeting bacteria is because of antibiotic resistance. So that causes a whole bunch of other problems when you're like throwing bacteria or antibiotics at things in a blanket way, and people become resistant to the antibiotics. Now they have to find new ways to treat those bacteria because the bacteria are antibiotic resistant. So it pushes, the research in a different direction, which I think is really beneficial for us at this point. With psoriasis, if you have clients with psoriasis, then we want to once again educate them that the bacterial imbalance is creating a lot of inflammation, and then improving that situation with the probiotics through a doctor and then prebiotics in their products. Rosacea. So rosacea is a really interesting um, it's a really interesting skin condition because, there is an aspect of dysbiosis where there may be more C. acne bacteria, the negative type, and there may be, of course, that overgrowth of Demodex mites. And so sometimes you can relate this to barrier dysfunction. There's obviously a ton of inflammation. And so increasing the bacterial diversity can be really helpful. But a lot of times, rosacea clients respond really well to exfoliation, like a gentle, low-level exfoliation. So, this is great because it's like removing some of those Demodex mites. But I think if you're going to choose that type of therapy for a rosacea client, it's even more important to make sure that you're protecting that microbiome with your prebiotic products before and after, and giving them stuff to use at home. And then seborrheic dermatitis. So if any of you guys do hair, work on scalps, anything like that, this is more of a yeast overgrowth. And so making sure to include like probiotic type ingredients with their antifungals will help to balance out that microbiome. There's plenty of antifungal ingredients that they can use topically, but if it's really bad, then they should see a doctor and get a topical antifungal to get rid of that in the meantime. But like long-term maintenance, right? This is what I say about eczema and about acne, and it applies to all of these things. But long-term maintenance of these is not just like only treating when people have flare-ups. It is always treating like they have a flare-up. So they need to always be using prebiotics and supporting their microbiome. They need to always be treating their barrier and treating their inflammation. Because the second you stop doing that, I mean, assuming that the skin goes back to being healthy on its own, fine. But the minute you stop doing stuff like that, you're more likely to increase that inflammatory response. So, um, you know, always do these things to be safe is my answer, even if it's just like your moisturizer has prebiotics in it, and that's going to help to influence the microbiome. Um, because I think a lot of these people just suffer from a lot of internal inflammation too, and that is part of the problem. And so you can't always control those aspects. You can't control the external and the internal 100%, but you can control sometimes what they use on their skin with good recommendations. Okay, so these are the skin problems. Talked about the different types of products. So our strategies when dealing with people that have maybe some potential microbiome dysfunction, or if you're like if you're like me, I like to treat everybody the safest way possible. And I think the safest thing I can do is always support their healthy microbiome. Like always, even if they don't have inflammatory skin conditions, I will always support a healthy microbiome because it doesn't make sense to just like not care about it. We know it's important. So the strategies would be things like those topical or oral probiotics as a recommendation, right? The prebiotics in our products, potential bacterial therapies they can get with a doctor, and then postbiotics, ferments, specific things that actually help to reduce inflammation and maintain that balance in the skin. And what we're going to be limited with, honestly, is like there's no FDA approval really for anything, right? In skincare, unless it's a medication. And this right now is not considered a medication. So there's no regulation on microbiome therapies. There's no regulation on probiotics. There's no regulation really on internal probiotics. As long as they don't make medical claims, it's not considered a medication. So there is supplementation in general, no regulation. Okay. So we have to be really careful about the promises that we make and the things that we say and what brands are telling us. And that goes back to what I was saying about ask those questions. Okay. Don't just blanket recommend probiotics, send them to someone who can help them. So that creates a big limitation on us in terms of what we can say and what we can do. It also sometimes creates a little bit of like, um, I was going to say like a roughness in our relationship with clients because we have to tell them bad news, things like, oh, probiotics don't really work in skincare because they don't survive the process of creation and bottling and storage and transferring and things like that. So having those types of conversations can be really challenging, but uh with more studies, I think in the long term, this will get more refined. It will become more clear what works and doesn't work. And even when it comes to like microbiome focused skincare, it's like still really evolving and it's not very precise. So a lot of times we're like throwing blanket um, ingredients at the skin that like we know can influence the microbiome, but what we don't know is like, is this influencing the good C. acne bacteria? Is it influencing the staph? Is it influencing this? Like that is kind of all up in the air. So once that becomes more refined in the future, I think we'll get a lot more information and technology about this. Ellie, my thoughts on Civ is that it doesn't have the research to back the effectiveness, and that doesn't mean that it's not effective. Some people may really benefit from it, especially acne clients. I've been using it uh, every day for a while now, and I didn't notice that it helped with my eczema flare-ups. So I don't know. And that's really why I was using it. I was like, huh, it's winter and I usually get eczema around this time. It's very normal for me. But that didn't seem to help necessarily. So I don't know that it's really giving me the bacteria that my skin needs. Maybe it's better for other people. But I don't think the research is there. And I'm pretty sure the founder like doesn't know a whole lot about the skin. That is my perception on things, but I don't know. So That's one of those things where like uh, if it works. All right, so let's talk about what to avoid. I want to start here. I hate talking about this type of thing because I feel like it creates this like fear around things or makes things like more anxious and like negative. But it is worth discussing that like these are all things that like potentially can jack up your barrier. And for me, it's more about making sure that the products that I use in my treatment room, not only don't have these, but like have things that are beneficial. And so I focus on that. And I don't always talk about these like more negative aspects with the clients personally, but it's good for us to know, right? Okay, so the number one thing I would say that you want to avoid is all the antimicrobials. Not all of them, right? I think what we can safely assume is that if we're going to use antimicrobial ingredients, we should also be nourishing the microbiome so that it's not completely destroying the skin. So maybe these are more like be careful with these things, but they are probably the most important category here of the avoid or be careful with. Benzoyl peroxide. It is it is effective against acne bacteria specifically, but it is also effective against harmful bacteria. So you don't have a choice in what bacteria gets killed when you're using benzoyl peroxide. Um, Antimicrobial soaps. And so, most of us are not using antimicrobial soap on our faces, but antimicrobial soap on our hands. If you have eczema or anything like that, can be absolutely uh, devastating for your microbiome. So, most of us that have eczema in this industry, our hands show that because we're constantly washing with antibacterial soaps. And it sucks because we have to do it, but I would say avoid it when possible. Parabens and formaldehyde releasing preservatives. So I really, really am so careful about how I talk about this with people because I am not a paraben hater. Okay. I think they serve a purpose. They are very well researched in skincare. They are not causing cancer, but what they can do is they can interfere with your beneficial bacteria because they are preventing bacterial growth. So that's something that you could be concerned about, but I don't think that it's one of these things where I'm going to say it's toxic and preservatives are toxic and you shouldn't be using them because I don't believe that. I believe that in order to be safer for the skin in terms of their microbiome, I choose to use products that don't have preservatives in them. And that also kind of comes along with the types of products that I generally like. So it's not something where I would say I won't use this because it has this in it because I hate parabens and they're evil. It's more like, if my microbiome is struggling, I know that because I have eczema, then maybe that's not something I want to play with necessarily for me. The next big category, and maybe this should be first and foremost, honestly, is harsh surfactants. So SLS and SLES, even the ones that are created from coconut or whatever, all of these surfactants, basically anything that foams upsets the microbiome because it goes in and without discerning the part of the molecule that connects to the oil and the thing, dirt and debris in the skin connects to everything it can find. And then the water-based part takes it and strips it away without any sort of discernment. So this is the number one microbiome killer after antibiotics is foaming cleansers. If I had my way, they would just go away permanently. But I know people love them. They like their skin to feel squeaky clean, but it's not always the best idea when you have microbiome imbalance. Alcohols and witch hazel. So this conversation about alcohols comes up pretty often in skincare. I think, it's it used to be more of a big deal because more products had alcohol in it, but it still comes up in terms of like we shouldn't be putting alcohol in our skin. And I want to make sure we know that this is like drying denatured alcohols and not the hydrating alcohols, because there are alcohols just a chemical designation, and there are some alcohols that dry and some alcohols that can moisturize. So specifically, we're talking about like denatured alcohol, like the kind of alcohol you would use to clean, essentially. And the reason that you find this in products is because this and witch hazel, is because they emulsify or like mix, they create a better solvent for oils. So if you're using a product that has a lot of essential oils in it, it is likely that you may have some alcohol in that product because it is the solvent for the essential oil. Sprays that have essential oils in them, you're going to find witch hazel or denatured alcohol as a solvent for that. So it's just something to think about. Like if you're using a spray toner, it should really be more of a hydrosol and not something that's witch hazel based or drying. Uh, Although witch hazel can be antimicrobial and it gets included in products for that reason, acne products specifically, for me personally, it's something that I don't recommend for my acne clients because of the, uh, the blanket antimicrobial aspect, but also the drying aspect and removing the barrier. Essentially, the minute that you touch your skin with alcohol, the barrier dissolves. And then it has to try to recreate that. So I don't really think that's a good idea for acne in general. It's a whole other conversation, but that will reduce the microbiome diversity. Exfoliants and peels. Uh, I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory. If you continue to strip your skin with acids, the microbiome goes away with that stripping. So being careful with that is really important. Physical scrubs are, something we should think about in terms of like the grit of the scrub. So I think for the most part, in formulated skincare, you're getting that like nice tiny little grit where it's not so much of an issue, but a like strong scrub with like aggressive little particles in it can create micro tears in the skin. And that can cause problems with your biome because it's leaving the skin vulnerable to other infections. And so then you have this overgrowth of non-helpful bacteria. Long-term use of antibiotics. This is something we want to avoid. Um, you can't really tell people what to do in a medical sense, but maybe putting this in their mind, like, hey, have you thought about trying to get off the antibiotics? Or have you thought about how this might be affecting you in other ways? And if people do have a history of long-term use of antibiotics, once again, refer them to someone who can do some testing for them. And then the last category in skincare products is fragrance. So artificial fragrance absolutely disrupt the microbiome. There's no question about that. I don't think it's as common to find synthetic fragrances in product anymore, but it does still exist. I see it in some of the like big skincare brands, the ones that are more commercial. Um, Glymed is one I've seen fragrance in. I'm trying to think of the other one I was just looking at the other day. But anyways, Dr. Dennis Gross, because I have quite a few Dr. Dennis Gross products because the spa that I used to work at had them. So definitely something that carries synthetic fragrances. Anytime you see synthetic fragrance, also assume alcohol because once again, it's a carrier for the fragrance. So that should be a concern. And if you look at natural organic skincare, essential oils. So essential oils are absolutely barrier disruptors, especially when it comes to the microbiome, because a lot of them have antimicrobial properties, and that may be why we're using them, but they're not selective. So they're killing kind of all the bacteria. There are some that actually are selective and can be selective when combined together. Or like when they extract a specific like terpene or something from the essential oil, then that could be beneficial, but that is going to be more of a lab created ingredient and not something you're finding in a natural skincare product. So for me, essential oils are more of a something that I'm careful about. I do not like natural brands. I'm just going to say this straight up. I don't like natural brands where all they do is like an oil base like jojoba whatever and then essential oil, or a spray that's like water and witch hazel and essential oil. Like that is not to me beneficial in any way. Now, if it's in like a very refined, like herbal based product where most of the scent and benefit from the product is coming from like these slow herbal infusions with like a little bit of essential oil, maybe as a preservative or for scent, then that's fine. But when it's in high amounts, high concentration, you are just asking for something bad to happen. And personally, with my own skin, this is something I can't mess around with. Essential oils always irritate my skin. I'm like itchy all over. I can't do it. So it has to be very low concentration. And so I just apply that to my clients as well. When I'm looking at skincare products, I look for low concentrations of essential oils and no synthetic fragrances because it's just for me, a big no for sensitive skin, but especially if you're thinking about the microbiome and how those interact with the microbiome, it's just not a good idea. So that brings us to what do we use then? Like what's going to be beneficial? And there are so many ingredients that are like great for the microbiome, safe. They help to increase the resiliency and the diversity. And this is really where like we should be focusing our attention on ingredients and seeing what we want to bring in or use with our clients. So in your prebiotic category, we have inulin and oat extract. So, a lot of prebiotics actually are carbohydrates, different types of starches, oligosaccharides, things like that. Um, because that like starchiness is what the bacteria like to eat. So you can put almost all of those types of things in this category: oat extracts, wheat extracts, like beta glucan, alpha glucan, all of those fit into this category of like feeding the microbiome. Sugars, bacteria love sugar. So things like kind of within that category, if you think about it that way. In the probiotic category, we have lactobacillus ferment. That's going to be pretty commonly used in a lot of products nowadays. Any sort of other bacillus ferment. Um, Bifidobacterium is another one that we see in products. The goal of these, right, is strengthening the microbiome by like adding in good bacteria. So once again, just ask the questions about like, where is this coming? How does it work? And then, the second route to that is like, test it. Do you feel like it works? Because that could also, just because they didn't store it the right way doesn't mean that it absolutely didn't work. We don't really know. We don't have that information yet. So use your best judgment and test and trust yourself for that. Postbiotics. So actually, a lot of lactic acids are created with this same process of exposing something, a bacteria, for example, to stress, and then taking uh, the product of that and then bottling it in a product. So lactic acid is one of those. Lactic acid is great for like lowering the pH of the skin, um, stabilizing the skin, increasing cell turnover, hydration, all of that. But in a low concentration. So it's not like a 20% lactic acid every day. It's like a very small amount of lactic acid every day can be really great. And for rosacea clients, that kind of combines together to some of your needs of exfoliation. With acne clients, same thing. Needs for exfoliation kind of fit in that same category. Fermented rice and green tea extracts are other postbiotics. So fermented rice, I feel like, was it Tata Harper? Was that the name of the brand that was like really into rice fermentations? And that was like one of the first like Sephora probiotic brands, I think, or prebiotics. But you can find this in like all sorts of stuff now, fermented extracts. And these are going to be like full of these nutrients that the biome actually needs to be supported. You do want to strengthen your barrier. And so The other aspect to this is that the microbiome works in conjunction with the skin barrier and the oil production and the water production of the skin. So you really need the skin barrier to be functioning properly as well, because that provides the food for the bacteria that keeps the bacteria healthy. So we want to make sure we have that good balance of ceramides and fatty acids for a strong barrier, as well as using things that like calm the inflammation, like colloidal oatmeal, um, panthenol or vitamin B. These are all really great, like anti-inflammatory things that can be added in. With the barrier strengthening aspect, I want to also kind of mention that the barrier requires different things. So you can't just like put one thing on it. Like, I'll use beef tallow as the example because this is a conversation I was having on Instagram recently, but you can't just like throw beef tallow or even coconut oil on something and it's like strengthening the barrier. It doesn't work that way. Your barrier needs fatty acids and ceramides. So, so using like a blend of oils that has some of these things in it, specifically raw unpressed oils, blended with the right types of like oil profiles for that specific skin type. So high linoleic for oily skin and high oleic for dry skin. Amazing for the barrier. But throwing coconut oil or beef tallow just offsets that balance and will once again offset your microbiome because your microbiome now doesn't have what it needs. So really important to keep that in mind as well. For gentle surfactants, oil cleansers. So oil cleansers, creamy cleansers, which a lot of times don't have foam in them. Or if you're like addicted to foam, you're like, I need the foam. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel clean. Then you want to make sure that the pH is balanced in that low range of like 5 to 5.5 and that the surfactants are more gentle. And there are some like really interesting surfactants out there that will help to preserve like the oils on the skin or nourish the skin at the same time. These are like man-made in a lab specifically to do these exact things. And you're only going to find them in those big brands that are doing the research. So they do exist even in brands like Cetaphil and CeraVe. Okay. They have these pH balance cleansers that have gentle surfactants. So it's not like you can't find them out there. It's just that we don't always think about that being important. A lot of times people just want their skin clean. Now with herbs, you have so many options. So the herbs I have separated into a few different categories, and I really pulled a lot of the herbal information from Laurel, Laurel Skin, because she just provides so much information on this as a foundation of their line, and then really tells you like what ingredients she's using for this. And if you look at her products, every single product is focused on microbiome support. Of course, there's different categories of like what your skin might need. And so you can pull from that category, but it's all going to nourish the microbiome in this really like um, intentional way where we're looking at each different category. So I pulled this from her and then I just added more to it. And I have the link in there so that you can actually go in and like read her journal about it and what she really focuses on. So one of the things she said is that the the microbiome, feeding the microbiome is really about like making sure that you meet all the needs of the microbiome. So you have a fat-loving portion of the microbiome and a water-loving portion of the microbiome. Just like the skin needs oil and water, right? In order for the barrier to be healthy. The bacteria need oil and water. So going back to our acne clients, we can't just completely strip them of all oil-based products because their microbiome needs oil to survive. So adding some oil into their routine can be helpful as long as we're doing it in a very intentional way. The main ingredients that you can pull from are like starchy plants. So going back to what I was saying about like carbohydrates and things like that, like starchy plants, roots actually have really great properties for holding hydration and nourishing the microbiome. High quality lipids. So looking at your oils and then making sure that your oils are high quality in the sense that they're unrefined and raw. And the reason behind this is because in that form, they contain all of the nutrients that the skin needs and they're not being depleted of some of the things that the microbiome needs to be healthy. Um, and then things that are water soluble, I already mentioned that. So the other thing you can do is kind of combine needs, right? So you really want nutrients for aging skin, but you can combine it with a well-formulated product with things that nourish the microbiome. The other brand you can look at for stuff like this is Live Botanicals. They do a pretty good job of this, although I think they use a little bit more like probiotic in their product. Um, from what I remember looking at different things that that's part of their formulation, but they have a lot of prebiotics in there as well. Okay, so anyways, for water soluble herbs, you have all of the roots, marshmallow especially. Marshmallow root is so good for the barrier and for the microbiome. It like I don't know if you guys have ever like drank throat coat tea, but marshmallow root is like a main ingredient in throat coat tea because it creates this like gooey texture in the water that actually coats your throat. So it like makes it so it's not as itchy. Well, it does the same thing on your skin. It like turns into this like it's called mucilage, this like almost gooey, rich texture, and then coats the skin, and then your bacteria can come and eat it and like feel really happy about it. It's like feeding them cake or actual marshmallows. Delicious, right? Think about marshmallows for your skin. Echinacea root is another one, burdock root, dandelion root. So also I would say licorice root is another one and licorice root is a great like cross ingredient where it's good for pigmentation. So those are really great. Other water soluble herbs you want to look for are things that are rich in minerals because the minerals also help to feed the microbiome. Minerals can be either fat soluble or water soluble. So water soluble minerals we can get from things like nettle, horsetail, comfrey root, or comfrey leaves. Um, Nettle and comfrey I've played with personally, like making poultices. So this is like one way you could use this is make like a microbiome supportive poultice. Um, and they don't smell good. So I find it better in a pre-formulated product that's already taken that into account. In your flowers or your petals, you have rose, calendula, chamomile, my absolute favorite, lavender. All of these are going to be like water soluble, but great for the barrier. Seeds like chia. Chia seed is another mucilage rich. Like when you mix chia with water, it turns into a goo. So great for the skin and the skin barrier and the microbiome. Flaxseed, hemp seed. And then you can get into other things like berries, which can be great for like feeding your microbiome because of the fruit saccharides that are in the berries. Green tea, rooibos, so different types of tea will also fit into this category. And then also to take it a step further, like if they're fermented in a product, then that's going to give you some additional benefits. For fat soluble botanicals, you want these raw, unrefined oils. So things like sesame. Sesame is really good for all skin types. So it's one that, isn't as overly oleic. Pomegranate oil is a great one, olive oil, evening primrose oil, which may be a little bit more on the heavy side. So for a drier skin, I do want to hone in on like none of these is a magic oil. And so like I wouldn't go choosing a brand just because they like focus on using olive oil. I think it's kind of ridiculous, but whatever. There are brands that do that, like olive oil, chia oil, things like that. And they can be great in this routine, but maybe not the only thing a person uses. For fat soluble minerals, actually Go-To Cola is a good source of fat soluble minerals. And so once again, just like feeding those fat loving bacteria everything they need. Other seed oils like black cumin. Black cumin is a really great antibacterial seed oil. So used in like a small concentration, I think that could be really beneficial for like an acne client or a rosacea client. Hemp is another good one, and then rosehip. Rosehip can be a little bit much, so you always want to make sure with rosehip that the skin is in good condition already, and it's great for aging and like pigmentation. But I would be a little hesitant to use it on an acneic skin. I know it comes up as one that is good for acne, but I just think it's maybe a little bit too stimulating sometimes for someone who's in a more inflammatory phase. And then all of your butters. So butters are great fat soluble botanicals, and you're going to find these primarily in balms or moisturizers. So if you're like me, like, and you're using all plant-based skincare, you don't really have moisturizers. You have balms. And in the balms, what they're doing is they're taking like the raw unrefined oils, potentially the herbs, things like that they're infusing, the seed oils, and then mixing them with the butter to make it more of a solid. And that's just a great way to get your nourishing ingredients. There's plenty of other nutrient dense botanicals that like can be cross used. So mushrooms, great for the microbiome, great for other things in the skin. All the soothing herbs, aloe vera, uh, the antioxidants like turmeric and rosemary. So all of these can be applied, directly to the skin in different ways or in products and used to nourish that microbiome. While not overly treating it, right? Because that's the other thing, we don't want to overtreat. So, in addition to that, I put together a list of like selective antimicrobials, which are antimicrobial ingredients um, that don't completely disrupt the microbiome. So tea tree oil in a very low concentration, like don't put straight tea tree oil on your face, but it can selectively target C. acne bacteria. So can thyme. Thyme and oregano actually can selectively target either bacteria or fungus or yeast when used in like the right concentration. Neem oil, and then honey and propolis. Both of those, basically raw honey products or bee products, have tons of antimicrobial properties, but they're also like full of nourishing ingredients for the microbiome. I would say for me, like honey is a must. I use honey in literally every single treatment unless the person is vegan and doesn't want it. And it's for this, like we're nourishing the skin as well as benefiting it in all these other ways. So your applications then, if you have, let's say you want to like make products or you want to look for products, these are the things that you're generally going to find. Hydrosols and herbal waters. So these are primarily like face mists or even like body mists that use herbal infusions. Um, and a hydrosol specifically, I would say is important over uh a spray that has an essential oil in it. I already said why, but hydrosols use either the water that is extracted during an essential oil steam distillation process, or they're creating an infusion where they like take some sort of like water, let's say marshmallow root is a good example of this. So you take water, you do like a warm infusion of the marshmallow root, and then you take that infusion and use it on your skin. Uh, Also, you can find hydrosols and things like that as a base for serums, or like in the case of like Laurel, which I love, their cleansers have like hydrosol bases instead of water. Um, this is the most common thing you'll find, I think, in brands that say that they don't use water in their formulas, but they have formulas that are not oil. Like they do use water, but it's because they're using a hydrosol or something like that that they use instead of water, which is basically like a fancy tea instead of water. In oil formulations, you're looking at your facial oils, your oil cleansers, and your balms and salves. So that's where you're going to get that like nutrient-rich, oil-based foundation. And then you can incorporate these herbs with all sorts of different special treatments. So herbal compresses, taking like any of these herbs that we talked about that sound good to you. I usually make them into like a tea, put them in a tea bag, and then I put them in water and soak my towels in that water. So that would be an herbal compress. You can put them in your steamer if you have the right type of steamer to do that. You can make herbal poultices with them. You could do your simple infusions, like a tea method of infusion, like I was just talking about, where you put the marshmallow root in water and then make a tea out of it and use that on the skin. You could spray it, or you could use an oil and do like a slow infused oil. I do this for scalp treatments. And so taking some of these herbs that are, microbiome beneficial and infusing a really good oil could be great for someone that does have seborrheic dermatitis. You can do herb infused honeys. So taking your raw honey and infusing herbs. You can make fresh herb masks. So I've done this in the past. And really, really enjoyed it, even though it's a little messy, but it's just something that you get used to and like have fun with when you're doing herb-based skincare. But you take like whatever herbs you want, grind them up into a pretty fine powder, and then just mix it with water. You can mix it with aloe vera, you can mix it with honey, and you put it directly on the skin. You could do the same thing with like fermented rice water, kombucha, honestly. Yogurt is another example of something that has a good amount of probiotics that you could put directly on the skin. I didn't even include yogurt in here, but it should be in here. I'm gonna put that yogurt. That way I remind myself. And then clay masks. So a lot of times with acne, we're looking for things that help to reduce oil. And so a clay mask can be great, and you can just blend some of those herbs in it. So taking like the idea of blending herbs and then add a little bit of clay to it to make it into a clay mask. And clay masks, you can buy clay on the internet, basically everywhere, to make a nice little clay mask to absorb oils and detoxify the skin. Um, what are my thoughts on using a facial steamer? Yes. Steamers are controversial in the holistic space. I personally love my steamer, but I like it for the herbal steam, so I don't usually put it really close to people. I put it kind of far away so they get like the smell of it and they get the warmth of it, but they don't feel overwhelmed and the skin doesn't feel overwhelmed. And I only do it during the cleanse. I don't do it for a really long time. But that's just because I really like it. But yeah, for people who have more inflammatory skin conditions, it's really not the best idea because you're just increasing the inflammation and potentially increasing the dehydration. Um, I would not say steamers are hydrating in any way. Uh, it feels good like on the inside of your nose, maybe it's hydrating on the inside, but for your skin, it's like warming up and kind of evaporating water on the surface of the skin that the skin needs. So I use them carefully, but I do really like it. I personally love a steamer right up in my face, and I don't have the skin that should be using that, but I love how it feels. So it's more of like that type of sensory experience for me than being beneficial on the skin for sure. Yeah, you'll find I'm very much like these are some rules about things, but also do whatever makes you feel good. That's why clients come to us. Um, so yeah, I have a whole guide for you guys that has like everything that we talked about listed. And then it also has all of the research documents. So you'll find a whole list of actual research studies. I did list the year that they came from, and I think that this is important because if you look at the older ones, you're going to see different verbiage than if you look at the newer ones. So they've got really good information, foundational information, but some of the verbiage isn't correct. So I would say if you like to go out and do research, make sure that you're looking for things that are current because you really want the most up-to-date information in this field. This isn't like researching retinol, where retinol research has been done consistently over time and finds the same results and like everything kind of aligns with everything else. You can look way back when and find really good information. This is not like that because it's an emerging field. So you need to look at the most recent research, I think, to get the most potent information for us right now. I like to use, Google Scholar or what was the other one? Like PubMed, anything like that, and get in there and just start looking at things and see what comes up when it comes to something like this, where I don't want to rely on just what everybody's saying or what brands are saying because I know that the research isn't there yet. So I want to know like what is the most current thing so that I know what questions to ask, which is why I was saying like one of those questions to ask would be like, how are you preserving these probiotics in products? Because the research is showing that it's just like not possible. So where are you getting this information kind of thing? Uh, So that would be my suggestion for something like this. Honestly, go down a rabbit hole if you want. Looking at different brands, I can tell you off the top of my head, Civ does that like probiotic serum, Life Botanicals, uh, Dermalogica. I know because I've used them. They do a lot of research in this, and their products do focus on the microbiome. If you like something more traditional, Laurel, of course, I'll say that a gajillion times. Their entire line is made for the microbiome. Um, but you can still find other things out there. So see what you find.